Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I cannot wait to introduce this guest. Not only is he an impressive athlete, but he is a seasoned professional in sports marketing industry. After 12 years in the NFL, including a Super Bowl win with the New York Giants, he has transitioned his leadership role to Under Armour. His strategic insights and extensive network have made him a valuable advisor to executives and boards across all sectors. Please welcome the managing partner of Chainable Corp, Ryan Kuehl. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me. This is great.
It's awesome having you on the show. As you know, we love talking about endurance and the endurance mindset. So, Ryan, I'd love to know how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly.
Hmm. That's a great question. I think that from my perspective, like just this idea of stay in the fight, right? I think that to me has always been sort of, whether it's in a game, my career in the NFL, my time at Under Armour as sort of an underdog brand growing, working with growth brands now, when I advise leaders or whatever else, it's always just stay in the fight, and to me, that's that mindset of not not a cliche like it's never over till it's over, but more just this idea of like if you keep calling and keep fighting, eventually, if you believe in what you're doing and you've got the right strategy and people and the right preparation and training, then you'll succeed. And whatever that maybe higher levels of success or lower levels of success, but you'll still get on the positive side of things, and that's probably where I've sort of excelled as I look back is just always figuring out a way to stay in the fight.
It's really interesting. Is there a particular point in your life that you realized that that was a key strategy to success?
And, I don't know if it was just came from growing up and playing sports or my parents, installing them here or whatever it is. But I just felt like, my training, playing football, EVA or being undrafted and making it in the NFL. Like it's just this idea somewhere in there. I just felt that like, if you stay in the fight longer than other people, like I was a good athlete, obviously from a high school perspective, but like pros, I wasn't at that level, right? I was a below average athlete, right? I wasn't, and so you just had to figure out a way to compete. You had to figure out a way to stay, and part of that is staying in the fight, right? And other people would just fall off, right? And so over time, you
Mm.
just sort of realize, well, they look good now, but in training camp, they won't look good in the by the time or that business looks good now, but in 6 months, you can sort of see things falling apart. Like just stay in it. Um, at UA, we talked about that a lot. Like just keep going, right? Like keep going forward. And eventually others tend to fall off. So between going forward and all those other people falling off because they're just not willing to do what you're willing to do to stay in the fight, well, then eventually you end up, if not on top, towards the top.
So, with a 12-year career in the NFL, I suspect that strategy was implemented many times across your career, either changing positions, changing strategies. Can you give us a little bit more insights or some examples of that?
Well, so, I was undrafted out of UVA. I went to San Francisco. They just won the Super Bowl. This is 1995. And I was around a bunch of pros. I mean, to me, I always tell people it's like playing with the Beatles. I mean, it was like Steve Young and Jerry Rice and John Taylor. And it's this great 49er teams. And I was the youngest guy on the team or one of the youngest. And, you just sit there and learn. And like, I think the one thing I did have installed in me early is like, learn, like listen. Like you're not the best. Like you have to learn from people in front of you. Don't be ashamed of that. Don't be afraid to be the dumbest guy in the room. Right? Ask questions. And I did. I observed a lot of these old pros that have been in the NFL forever and learned how they trained and learned how they did things and how they went about their business. I took that to Washington and I was still playing defensive line, but and I was a guy that didn't look good in shorts, right? I wouldn't make a team now. They don't hit enough in practice. I needed pads on. I needed to be rough and tumble. Again, that idea of like eventually, like I was willing to go hard for 4 straight days of 2 days in pads. Others weren't, right? And that separated me by the time you got to the third or fourth day, right? So that's how I sort of survived early in my career as a defensive lineman. Like I was just willing to keep going, and I could go hard every day in practice where others couldn't. when it got tough, when it got hot and you're in pads and everything else. Nowadays, they don't hit enough in practice. I never would get to that point, right? I never would get to that point where people would fall off, so, by but in Washington, even though I had some success, started some games, they're always looking to replace me. They're always looking to draft people. They brought in free agents, everything else. And eventually I figured out, it was a tough way to sort of go about it, even though I'd already probably exceeded where everyone thought I would be. Well, I know I did because I didn't get drafted. I looked over and I realized that the long snappers never got messed with. And so this idea of if I could figure out how to do that and play defensive line at the same time, I've just increased my value. Right. So now I'm taking two
Yeah.
spots, 53 man on the roster. Right. So through training, practice, learning, whatever, over time, I learned how to do that. I didn't actually pay off till I went to Cleveland. Cleveland in 1999, the expansion team. I left Washington. I got hurt at the end of my time there, and Cleveland expansion, like the fact that I could play defensive line and snap, all of a sudden my value to that organization skyrocketed. And then over time, I ended up getting a fight in practice, breaking my hand. It's a long story. Because my third year, I played 2 years. I did both, and then my third and fourth year, I stopped playing defensive line. But all of a sudden, I went from like a fringe guy that had to battle to make the roster every spring and summer to a guy that was like, wow, he can snap and he can be our seventh defensive lineman dressed. So I could play left side and right side. I could play inside and out. Right. So not everybody could do that. I knew the defenses, and they could trust me on defense, and I could snap. And so that's all of a sudden when stability entered into my NFL life, right? Where I knew I was going to have a job. I was going to completely screw it up, right? I was earning street cred snapping because you can't really have a bad one. Like that's part of that mindset is like you got to be basically perfect or very close to perfect every time. Um, and so that's what really lengthened my career for probably a 3, 4, 5 year career, 12 years, right? Is that idea of like transitioning into snapping, adding that arrow in my quiver, and then getting really good at it, where that became the value, not the defensive line as I got older. And to me, that's just being realistic with your skill set, understanding the surroundings, understanding the dynamic of the marketplace, understanding that simple things. There's 53 jobs. If I can do two of them, I've just freed up a spot for somebody else, right? And the teams value that. Like just understanding that piece. Like a lot of athletes, I think, at all levels, they get very tunnel vision, which I appreciate. I did too. But because you have to have that to get to the highest level, you have to have that commitment, right? And I don't care what you're doing in sport, in athletics, right? But at times, there are times in the year and times where, in parts of the day where you need to think about the surroundings and the environment and the ecosystem that you're in and how you can also use those thoughts and strategies to elevate yourself as well. Besides just training more and working harder and the football world's getting bigger, getting stronger, all that stuff, right? So there's more to it than just that. And I think that's what helped me lengthen my career and have the success that I did.
You left me a little breadcrumb there, Ryan, when you talked about being a long snapper and the mindset that every snap
Mhm.
has to be perfect. Can you go a little bit deeper in that? Did you train mindset, or was it just a matter of focus, or like how did you sort of address that aspect of the training?
I did it enough where I didn't think about it. Right. So like I did it enough. I
Mm,
practiced enough. I did enough reps. I was willing to do that. Right. Like we all are. That I knew that what the standard was. The standard was essentially 95% and above, maybe 98% above. This is back. It's a little different nowadays. They've changed some rules, but we had to protect and we had to do some things physically that they don't have to do now, protection wise and things like that. Which is fine. That's just the evolution of the game. So there was some of that. You had to be able to do that part too, but it didn't matter if you couldn't deliver the ball in the spot that it needed to be delivered. And it needed to happen every time. And every time is not just in games, but in practice too. So you're talking about hundreds of thousands of reps, right? Over, the 8 years that I snapped, 7 years that I snapped, right? So, and that's off season. It didn't matter. Everyone else was allowed to, get used to the off season or sort of knock the rust off. I wasn't at least in my mindset, I wasn't. right? So I wasn't allowed to, oh, it's first day. It's going to be a little rough. Kicker can miss a kick. The punter can be a little bit off. The quarterback can be a little bit off. Receiver can drop a ball. No, not me. I had to show up on day one and I
Mm.
had to be at that standard. At least that was my mindset. Um, and so you get to a point where you practice enough where it's funny. I remember one time I was on the sideline and I would always sort of, pregame it. I would, in Sunday mornings, you get up, you get breakfast, I get to the stadium at, 9:30 or whatever else for like a 1 o'clock kick. And I'd do the New York Times crossword puzzle in the locker room. I'd get half dressed and I'd have the warm up period and I'd come in. I always had a half hour. And I remember Tom Coughlin always walked by me and he'd get pissed off because I was like, I was sitting there in my locker room, my feet crossed, just doing New York Times. And he'd go, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Tom, you have a 4-letter word for it." Like, and he just, but that was a way to relax. Was relaxing myself. I was trying to get myself in a mindset where I was just like, this is normal, right? So that because there's the pressure when you have 80,000 people and you may have a game-winning kick or any snap candidly, and you got TV and everything else, and people only really know you when you screw up, and that's when they should know you, right? And
Mhm.
so you just have to sort of trick your mind into that. And I remember there was one time, so he would always sort of mess with me, or he didn't understand what I was doing, and I was standing next to him right before the national anthem, and I sort of muttered to myself. I said, "Okay, turn the mind off," right? Because I was just like, "This is now we're just going to let it ride," right? And he turned to me, and goes, "What the hell did you just say?" This mind off. This is a thinking man's game. I'm like, "Tom, I'm just trying to like, just leave me alone." Right? Like, yeah, I'm not screwed up for you yet. Just let me do my thing. I turned around and walked away. Like that's the kind of, but that's what you have to practice so much time to just trust that you have the, you have the ability to do it. You just gotta, the only thing that can stop you from performing at that point is your mind. It's not the
Mm.
physical side of it. So get the mind out of the way. Don't let yourself think about the stadium or anything else. It's just a normal day, and that's how I looked at it.
That leads me into the next question, um, sort of same topic, and you know, me for train like I do Ironman races, and I train for about 9 months, and that training increases, and then I get to sort of race day, and usually everything that I will experience on race day, I've experienced some time during training. It could be a flat tire, it could be bad nutrition, it could be heat exhaustion, you name it. And so when I get to race day, I've got this sort of comfort level at the starting line. But I gotta imagine it's much different between practice at the NFL level and game day. Like, how do you really get ready for a game day experience in practice? Are you practicing at that same sort of pace and level and
No, 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 no.
intensity?
Practice. Yeah, I would try to practice enough. Just I'd break it down, and the training was much different, right? The difference in football than other sports, and I don't know much about marathon or triathlons or even marathons, candidly, but like the idea of like we have one game a week. So it takes team sports as an example. Let's say like baseball, they play 3 games a week. For basketball, you play 3 games a week. Hockey, you play 3 games a week. We play one game a week. We practice 6 days to play once. Right. Others
Mm,
practice, I know guys in the NBA, they do like a shoot around every 3rd day off, right? Like, basically just like play, recover, a little bit of walkthrough. We were spending, getting to the facility at 6:30 in the morning and leaving at 4:30 in the afternoon, 3 days a week, Wednesday through Friday in prep for Sunday. So, and then you work Saturday, travel or not travel, and you work, Tuesday was a day off or whatever. So my point is there's a lot of time that you have. So you can't have that intensity over the course of
mm,
the whole week. So you have to learn to like what's your work rate that you can have to get the job done on Sunday and then spread that over, in my time, 16 weeks. Right. So we always said that everybody starts at 100 at the start of the season and then everybody declines. It's just a case of what rate do you decline? Right. And that's mentally
mm.
and physically. Right. So everyone thinks, oh, yeah, physically, like injuries. I'm like, no, no, it's also mentally. Right. That's what you hear about the rookie wall and other things. It's pro sports and things like that. That's not necessarily always physical. A lot of that's mental. Like they're just fried. And they no longer can bring the same level of intensity to preparation at week 12 through 17 nowadays, or 13, or whenever they hit it, that they did early. And even if they're physically able to play, because they didn't put the same level of intensity and preparation, they're not going to play as well. Now, then you layer in the physical limitations that everybody gets over the course of the season, and it sort of compounds itself. So, what I always try to do, I think most guys who play a long time do, is like again find that burn level. Is that 80%? It can't be 50%. You have to do the preparation and have to get to a certain pace and level of focus. But is it 80%? Is it 70%? Is it 90%? And then playoffs, it gets up there pretty high. Because no on Sundays or Mondays or whenever you're playing, you're going to be at 100 or 110%, right? Like you're going to be burning hot. So you got to learn, like, what can I do over the course of the week that I can get my work in, prepare to play, but not at a rate where I can't sustain it throughout the entire, 5 months, 6 months.
That's super helpful. I'd love to transition our conversation and talk about your experience at Under
Hmm.
Armour. Before we dive into the details, like, as a professional athlete, how is that for you to transition from being an athlete into corporate world?
Well, this is where it helped being a bottom of the roster guy. Okay. In football, because I knew I wasn't going to make enough money to retire ever. I wasn't going to have the, $50 million guaranteed and be able to do what I wanted. Right. So, I started preparing to transfer the first off season I made it, because I just figured it was going to
Mm,
come. So I got my MBA while I was playing. I would go to school in the off season at American University. That was all part of transitioning, right? Because everyone's like, "Oh, you played football, you'll get a job." I'm like, "Yeah, but if I played football and had an MBA, like that would be better, right, than just having football, right?" And then I spent a lot of my time where I think a lot of guys screw up, and I tried to help when I played. Um, I think a lot of guys screw up is that they just don't take advantage of the time they have in the off season, and when they do, they don't take the right approach. And the approach I always took when I was looking to build out network or build out relationships was that I was asking them to do a favor. So I always treated it like, if I asked someone to, hey, you want to meet for lunch in New York City, as a banker or finance or marketing or whatever it may be, I would take them to lunch, right? I would
mm.
buy them a coffee. I'd come to them, right? Even though I was a New York Giant or a Cleveland Brown or whatever, or Washington Redskin or whatever it may be, I knew somehow intuitively that, like, I'm asking you for your time. I've got time. It's my off season. I could be at 8 a.m. I could do it at noon. I could do a late lunch. I could do 5 o'clock, whatever. Like, and so I sort of looked, and I think that was that mindset of like just not being the NFL player, but just being the guy that at some point is going to transition and it's got some intellectual curiosity about an industry or a job or um, a career. Well, then you should take, you're asking for them, their counsel, you should hook them up, right? And so I think that probably separated myself where a lot of guys think, well, I'll go to lunch with them. They're going to dinner or lunch with a pro football player. That's like a cool thing for them. They'll tell everybody in their office and yeah, yeah. Well, that's
Hey,
good for them. Like, great. That didn't help me. Right. So I took the different approach. So I started thinking about transitioning. So I spent a lot of time networking, finding people, learning about different industries, learning about what I wanted to do. I was a player rep for 7 years, and I was a part of two CBA extensions while I played. That's where I really learned about the business side of football. I got out of the economics of the locker
mm,
room, which is like salaries and stuff like that and fines, and got into how the actual pie is made. And that was part of my interest to stay in sports and be around sports versus doing something else. Um, and so once I got sort of that clarity, then I just focused my attention in building relationships. And I've over time built a relationship with Kevin Plank, and that's how I ended up in Under Armour. But it took time, and I had the time to spend, so it worked out.
If my math is correct, you would have been there sort of right during the period when Under Armour sort of exploded, right? I remember you being an East Coast guy just outside of Baltimore when Under Armour was just sort of scratching the surface and coming out as a brand, and we're sort of watching it. And then fast forward 5 years, it's everywhere. It's on shirts on PGA Tour. It's it's a major brand now. Um, Talk to us about what it was like inside Under Armour during that growth days.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, we were growing from when I started, we were 750 million bucks, and when I left, we were 5.4 billion in 10 years. So pretty good growth rate. And it was fast and loose and a ton of fun. And you were, I felt like I was working with brothers and sisters.
Mm.
So you fought like brothers and sisters, and then you hug like brothers and sisters, then you party like brothers and sisters, and we had our fun. And it was just, we were really hot. And Kevin laid out a vision, and we were the right team at the right time to do it. And we had a lot of really smart people, um, and all had sort of like ways we were going about business, and so it created a very cohesive sort of team. When I started, I wasn't a senior, obviously, when I left, but that my era of leadership was like that. And was it all perfect? No, but was it all really good? Yeah, I thought so, and I think the results proved it out. And I think we were focused on what we were doing at the time, and focus is a powerful thing when you get a group of people, like-minded people that were operating in similar ways with a bunch of focus on the right things. Just like anything, a team or whatever else. Like it was really a cool experience. I didn't appreciate it. I appreciated the people when I was there for sure. Most of them. Every team's got a few jerks, but for the most part, I very much appreciated the people there, and I thought they were all really, really good at what they did. And yeah, it was a super learning experience, and really impactful to myself, my family, and my outlook on business now.
So we started the podcast talking about stay in the fight. Any specific or any example you could give of a story, like, while at Under Armour, that strategy of staying in the fight sort of proved out to be the key to a decision or a successful outcome?
Yeah, I'll tell you a interesting one. So I started in North America sports, and then I was put in charge of starting the golf business. And the f- I we had good product. We had obviously a hot brand, and golf was a global aspect to it. I really liked, and I needed a face. I needed somebody that could build there. We had a few golfers that were good players and good guys, but I needed someone who could break through. And at the time, Rory McIlroy was out looking, and this was in the fall, and this was around the Ryder Cup that was in Chicago. I can't remember exactly what year that was. It's probably like 2012. Um, and I was talking to his agent, a guy named Chubby Chandler. And Chubby was a British guy, big British guy, liked to drink beer and smoke cigarettes. Um, and I knew that um, Rory had been with Oakley. I knew that there was a club issue, and I'd heard that he was going to sign with Titleist. And at Under Armour, since we didn't have clubs, we liked guys who played with Titleist because that means we could get a chance to do their apparel. So Titleist, Ping, Cobra, we loved those guys. If you went to Nike, who was our main competitor, obviously, they had clubs. They were going to do everything. So club and apparel. So I worked hard on Rory. Like Rory, he was global, young guys, super obviously super talented. And we were trying to get global as well. So it covered a lot of things off both golf wise and the brand. And I was in the fight. Like I was battling. I was taking Chubby to dinner. I was flying here, flying there, really trying to chase him down. Um, I didn't think Nike had a shot because I didn't think he wanted to play Nike clubs. I didn't think he wanted to play Nike balls. It turns out it's at the end of the day, Nike, he did sign with Nike. And this was after, 2 months of solid, like pursuing, like a lot of energy and effort and time. It happens. It sucked. But I was like, you know, it was really a gut punch.
Mm.
So I thought I had the relationship. I thought I had the ability to do this. I thought Titleist was in the mix. They were doing their own deal. I didn't know what the terms were, but I knew that they were in the mix. I'm like, there's no way this young guy's going to switch. Like, there's just no way. Nobody good golfer switch, especially their ball. Like, we're switching the ball is like really a tough, putt, pardon the pun. Um, and so, but I lost. I shifted, and it turns out I shifted to a kid named Jordan Speed. Right, I went younger. Right, I said, okay, well, if I can't get him, what's And there was a little time, there was maybe, I think it was not till the next summer. So some time had passed and Jordan had started to play really well. And, I sort of, you sort of lick your wounds and figure out what you did wrong and pursuing of the other one. I met Jordan here at Congressional in DC. He was on a um, sponsors exemption. And, I actually, I've told this story before. I was going to meet him and his dad on the 10th hole at Congressional. But I actually showed up when he was on the 6th hole, and I walked in the woods and I watched him. This is what I did with a lot of athletes. And I was fortunate to have some success signing athletes. Um, and he was 18 years old, and I wanted to watch how he acted. Did he act like a spoiled brat, or did he act like he belonged? And from the first time I saw him at 18 years old, he's playing with two guys in his practice round that were in their early 30s, and it was like they were buddies.
Hmm.
And he missed a putt on 6 at Congressional, and he just sort of handed his putter to the caddy, and then the caddy was doing it. He walked over, picked the flag up, and handed it to his caddy. I was like, that's pretty cool, you know? And just walking down the middle of the fairway, hands in his pockets, just chatting, looking fans in the eyes, even though he's 18 years old. You know, I'm like, this is just after his freshman year at Texas. Um, and so I just was really impressed with how he acted. That's why I always try, whenever I signed athletes, it was always get past the talent part. Um, my one axiom I always told people at Under Armour, and I've told other clients now, money only makes athletes less motivated. Okay. And so you have to get past the money and find out what makes them really tick. And if you can do that, then you can find out how great they want to be. Okay. And brands or teams, whatever, they want greatness. You're not drafting somebody or signing because they really want to be good. You want them to be great. You want them to, they may not make it, but you want them to have the intent. And so that's why I got with Rory, but I really got with Jordan. I really honed that in. And so anyway, I ended up signing him, a year later. We partnered he turned pro in the fall. I signed him a month after he turned pro, but it started like with that sort of interaction. But it started a year earlier when I lost Rory, and taking those wounds and all right, like what did I learn from that? How can I shift and tell a different story to an up and coming golfer?
I love that story. Was that a US Open at Congo?
No,
No.
no, no, no. It was I think it was one of Tiger's events or something. I can't remember.
Got it.
I
Got it.
very clearly remember walking, and I remember meeting him and his dad. And his dad was walking with him, and I connected through somebody else I knew. And so I walked with his dad and Jordan for 4 holes, starting at 10. But got there when he was on 6. I just sort of stayed in the woods and watched, and he didn't know I was watching. So, and the funny thing about Jordan was like, I did this with a lot of guys. I was fortunate. I signed in golf that 3-year period. I signed Jordan, Cam Smith, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Gary Woodland. So all of them have won majors now, and I signed them all before they were 23. Three of them before they were 20.
Mm.
And it's all about getting past the money. Like you have to figure out. Sometimes agents won't let you, and they get very protective, but you have to get past the money. And you have to be smart in how you do it. And maybe because I was an ex-athlete, I got a little more, leeway or whatever else. But that's how I did it. That's the key to it.
And when you say get past the money, is that developing a relationship with the player before you really start talking dollars and cents?
Not necessarily. It just means it can't be about the money.
Mm.
If you're just partnering because you write a bigger check, you may still have to write a bigger check, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. But if it's just for that, then if that's the only reason you're doing it, then you're running a risk. I wanted athletes that wanted to be great. Right. And so money demotivates athletes, right? It's easier to skip a workout. It's easier to not go head balls. It's easier to, that's what you see this in sports across NBA, Major League Baseball. Like, who are they going to get these big guaranteed contracts, and who are the guys that keep excelling after they get paid? Right. I wanted that guy or gal. Right. I wanted that person. We made some mistakes. We signed some folks that weren't like that. As soon as they won a major or won a championship or won award or whatever else, they flatlined or declined because they'd sort of made it, right? And so I wanted to stay away from those kind of guys and gals. I wanted people that wanted to excel. And if it's about the money, they won't. If it's about being great, they will, you know? And so you have to find that out. And the only way to do that is building a relationship, spending time with them, away from people, figuring out what they're about. I mean, I played ping pong, I played darts, I'd play anything just to try to get them to loosen up and find out like I mean, I played ping pong. I remember after Spieth won maybe his first Masters, or like we played ping pong till like 4 in the morning, like sweating, just like wham, wham, just like pounding the ball. Right? I didn't care. We had a great time, right? Play ping pong all the time. Like there's just what do you do to try to find out like how competitive are they? And that's watch sports for them. I had people here to the house, and if a NBA basketball game was on or a big football game or whatever else, we'd have dinner or whatever else. I'd put the game on, and would they just sort of watch, or would they really watch? And like,
Mm.
oh, like how did they react to a big player, to a he's like, you just observe things and you can find out pretty fast, like what makes them tick, and inside, not outside.
I'm curious. I'd love to talk to you about what you're doing now and how leveraging those experiences, both in your professional career, in your sports career, and then also with UA. Talk to us, Ryan, what you're doing now with your consulting work.
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm in sort of phase three, right? So it's like NFL playing was first career, Under Armour was 10 years, second career. And for the last 5 years, I've been one partner and I here in DC. We've got clients everywhere. We've been working with emerging brands, small startup, Series A, Series B finance level, um, $2 to $20 million in revenue, working with founder, owner, operator types, some boards to help them get ready for the next round of financing, help them grow, put plans in, I mean, full funnel, so top of the funnel all the way through to conversion. Where are they selling? How they're selling? What's the team like? What's their back end like? What's their technology and systems, operating systems? Where are they? All that kind of sort of evaluation and helping to implement in a very sort of intimate way. We're not looking to um, get hundreds of clients. It's we have a small team, and we get invested with our clients, and we like it that way. We want the client to trust us, and that's when we can be most effective. And I think that the idea of observing, the idea of being able to find out what people, how like, again, signing athletes, how people tick, what I just explained, or when I was running global sports and understanding the difference in cultures between, we used to kid ourselves at Under Armour when we first launched it at Europe, we'd always laugh and say, it's not the United States of Europe, right? Italy's different than Germany,
Mhm.
right? So like understanding the difference of cultures and what the expectations are. Well, it's the same thing as understanding your consumer, right? So like, taking those lessons and applying them and maybe, morphing it a little bit, but applying the same general um, outlook on what the consumer's expectations are, what your team's expectations are, what's the leadership expectations, all of those things. Like what's driving this mission of a brand or of a tech platform or of a new product or whatever it may be. Getting to that mission, all of those things I think I've taken from playing and being around a bunch of great teammates, and in pressure situations and all trying to strive for a goal, like in playing football, to playing, working with a bunch of great folks at Under Armour and the mission we were trying to do to build a great sporting goods brand. Um, it's a culture thing, it's a mindset, all of those kind of things. And I think we've been able to, with a lot of sort of smart observation and ability to communicate, help and affect a lot of businesses to date, um, grow and get to the goals that the owner operators want. So it's everyone's when I've talked to other people, it's like, how do you transition? How do you do this? Like third, like I sort of laid out. I'm like, I'm not sure how I did it. I just did. Right. And if you're aware enough and understand what's applicable and what's not, then you should be able to, if you get help,
Mhm.
right? And, be a value add. And, the key is to make that, that addition, that value add, something that's the owner operator sees value in as well. So it's been good.
Yes, as my coach would say, um, as I've gone through transitions, she says, just walk through the door that's open, right? Like look around you and see what opportunities are in front of you. And there's probably an open door, and walk through that one. Like, don't keep banging your head against the door that's closed. Keep it simple.
It's a fair, it's yeah, just quickly, it's a fair point, right? This idea of like, don't like, you know, a lot of people are scared. Someone tell me sometimes you jump in the pool, sometimes you get pushed in the pool.
Mm,
Either way, you're in the pool. Right? So like, don't be scared of it. Embrace it. Lean into it.
100%. So Brian, we've got a handful of entrepreneurs that listen to this show. Many of them are young brands. Any words of advice on those trying to start brands, start nutrition products, start exercise equipment? Um, any words of advice for those younger entrepreneurs trying to create create a bigger brand?
I think first of all, it's a great endeavor that they're on, right? And it may not work. Many of them don't. It doesn't mean that your plan was bad or that you're a bad leader or you're bad at what you do. There's a lot of luck that goes involved, but you can also work yourself into a position to get more luck too, right? And so my broader advice would be like, stick to your guns, understand the value your product is providing, and make sure your consumer understands that too. So this whole axiom of like, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them, right? Like, like be um deliberate, right? Like be deliberate. Understand that if you really believe you've got a product that's going to help a certain group of consumers, then be deliberate in what that product can do and tell them,
Mm,
right? And show them. And then you'll get authenticity. And authenticity to me is the biggest thing that a brand could get, especially in CPG land, right? Now it's B2B stuff, maybe it's a little bit different, but CPG land in particular, like get authentic. And if you can get, and it's really hard to get, and it's hard sometimes to put your thumb on it, but you know when you got it,
mm.
right? So I've got a client right now that I've got pro athletes buying the product with their own credit cards, and we're shipping it to the facility. We're not handing it to them. We're not giving it to them. They're buying it. We see the credit card, right? So clearly somebody is telling that athlete, you should try this. This is really good, or they wouldn't do it, right? That's authentic,
Mm.
right? That's authentic. That's like this athlete believes. No one's paying me. No one's doing this. I'm not getting it for free. I'm not trying. So my point is like, to me, early days, like that's the goal. And then you can monetize that, and you can grow and you can improve your channels and retail and you can sell direct early days and control that. And you can market socially and all that's very controllable. And then you can scale out from there. But if you can get authenticity with your consumer base, you can win, at Under Armour, when we were really hot, we would laugh. We'd say, we could have put a UA on a coffee mug and told everybody that kept their coffee 10 minutes hotter or hotter for 10 minutes longer than the next coffee mug. And people would have believed us.
Mhm.
Now they believed us one time. And then when it didn't work, they never come back to us. Right. So it's all authentic, right? You have to be authentic in your message and what the value you're providing. If you can get that, then you can scale. So that to me is always like mission critical number one, and no matter how big the audience is.
That's great advice. Ryan, an audience member wants to get in touch with you. What's your social media platform of choice?
I would say probably LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. So Ryan, I don't know, Ryan Kuehl, I don't know whatever I'm not sure what it is, but you can find me Chainable Corp. That's another way to do it. So, but either way, LinkedIn's probably the easiest one for that.
Fantastic. And we'll include those links in our show notes for sure. Ryan, thank you for your time today. This was an amazing journey. We started talking about staying in the fight and how that weaved you through your NFL career and into UA, and now how you're implementing those learnings with your client base for these growing brands. And we finished off talking about getting authentic, which could be a whole different podcast of really diving into that. But the value that you've delivered to our audience today is tremendous. There's a lot of learnings through the stories we've been telling. Audience members, please like the show. Please send this to your friends. Please subscribe. Follow Ryan on his social media. Again, it's been great having you on the show, Ryan. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. It's great to talk.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, Be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefelenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.